She showed up at my door, clipboard in hand, yelling about unauthorized construction, all because I was building a simple fence on my own property. She threatened me with fines, violations, and even said she'd escalate this to the board. What she didn't know was that I had just been elected the new HOA president. She wanted a war. She had no idea who she was messing with. What started as a petty power move turned into a full-blown neighborhood reckoning. Hidden agendas, corrupt board members, and one Karen who'd stop at nothing to control the block, even if it meant breaking the law herself. This isn't just a story about a fence. This is about standing up to bullies, flipping the script, and reclaiming your power. And if you're ready for the kind of story that leaves a mark, hit that like button, subscribe, and get comfortable. This one's going to stay with you. It was supposed to be a peaceful Saturday morning, the kind where you sipped coffee on the porch and finally tackle that to-do list you've been putting off for months. For me, that meant building a simple wooden fence around my backyard. Nothing extravagant, just something to give us a little more privacy after too many evenings of our neighbor's dog wandering into our yard and their teenage son using our lawn as a shortcut. So I was out there, measuring posts, laying out planks, just getting into the rhythm when I heard it. The unmistakable sound of shoes clacking aggressively across pavement. And then, her voice. "Excuse me. What exactly do you think you're doing?" I turned around, and there she was. Karen, blonde bob, pastel sweater, oversized sunglasses, clipboard in hand, like she was auditioning for an unpaid role in a low-budget neighborhood drama. I gave a polite nod. "Just putting up a fence. I submitted the design weeks ago." Karen scoffed. "Not approved. Not by me. You can't just start building things without HOA authorization. You're violating Code 1 for unauthorized exterior modifications." I blinked. Pretty sure that was reviewed. I emailed the HOA. Got confirmation. She stepped forward, flipping through her papers like she was reading off the Constitution. "Doesn't matter. I didn't see it. And if I don't see it, it doesn't happen. You're looking at a $500 fine and daily penalties until this mess is torn down." Mess? I'd barely put in 2 posts. I tried to stay calm. "Look, Karen, I followed the rules. If there's a mix-up, I'll call the board Monday." "Oh, you don't need to call anyone," she snapped. "I am the board liaison. I'll handle it, and trust me, you'll be hearing from us soon." She turned on her heel and walked off like she just dropped the mic at a HOA comedy roast. The worst part, she genuinely believed she had the final say. Now, here's where most people panic. Tear the fence down, apologize, hide, but I didn't. Not because I wanted to pick a fight, but because Karen didn't know something very important. I had just been elected the new HOA president. 2 weeks before this little showdown, the board held an election. Quiet, under the radar, like they wanted as little participation as possible. But I'd had enough of the ridiculous fines, the micromanagement, and yes, Karen, so I ran. Low-key, no yard signs. No campaigning, just word of mouth and a digital form, and I won, barely. The results were official, but they hadn't been announced yet. The board was supposed to send out the newsletter on Monday. That meant Karen was out here threatening to fine the future president of the HOA over a fence. That had already been approved, but I didn't tell her. Not yet. I wanted to see just how far she'd go, and oh, she did not disappoint. By Monday morning, I had 3 official violation notices taped to my front door, each one more dramatic than the last. Cease and desist, legal action may follow. One even said final warning, as if this were some kind of battle between good and evil. She was escalating fast, and I wasn't even mad, honestly. It was kind of impressive how quickly she weaponized the clipboard. But here's the thing about people like Karen. They thrive on fear. They bark the loudest when they think no one will bark back. She didn't realize she wasn't the one in control anymore. Not only was I about to become her boss, had receipts, emails, HOA rulebooks, even screenshots of past exceptions she approved for her friends. I had done my homework, and now I had the title to go with it, but I wasn't going to stoop to her level. I wasn't going to scream in the street or slap a fine on her garden gnomes just to make a point. No, I was going to let her bury herself. Because once that HOA meeting rolled around, and the president was officially introduced, the entire neighborhood would see the truth. And Karen, she was in for one hell of a surprise. 3 months ago, I wouldn't have believed I'd be in this position. I wasn't the type to get involved with HOA politics. I paid my dues, followed the rules, waved at my neighbors, and stayed out of the drama. But that was before Karen made it her mission to turn the entire neighborhood into her personal kingdom. It started small. A note about my trash cans being out too early. A warning for leaving my Christmas lights up 3 days past New Year's. Then, a letter about my grass being half an inch taller than regulation length. At first, I laughed it off. I figured she just needed a hobby or a therapist. But over time, it stopped being funny. Neighbors started whispering about her. One family got fined for painting their door a color she didn't like. Another got reported because their teenage daughter parked in the street. No rule was too minor, no violation too petty. And if you crossed her, forget it. Suddenly, every move you made was under review. So when the annual HOA election came around, I saw an opportunity. I didn't announce it, didn't post about it on Facebook. Just quietly gathered the required signatures, filled out the form, and submitted my name for consideration. There were 2 open seats, one for president, one for treasurer. Karen, of course, was running unopposed for vice president. She had no idea I was even in the race. Apparently, no one expected anyone to challenge the current president. The guy had been in charge for years, barely showed up to meetings, and rubber-stamped whatever Karen pushed through. He was more of a figurehead than a leader. People were tired of it, they just didn't think they had a choice. I gave them one. I went door to door, had real conversations. I listened to complaints, took notes, shared what I'd do differently. People were shocked I even cared. One neighbor literally said, "You're the first person to ask what we think." That's when I realized something. Karen's biggest weapon wasn't the HOA handbook, it was apathy. People gave up because they felt like no one would fight back, but I would. When the voting ended, I expected a close result. What I didn't expect was the call I got that Friday evening. "Congratulations," the HOA secretary said, almost awkwardly. "You're the new president." Just like that. No celebration, no official notice. Just a quiet announcement, buried under layers of HOA silence. The newsletter wouldn't go out until Monday, which meant for 3 days, no one knew. Except me, not Karen. So, when she stormed up to my house that Saturday and tried to find me for my own fence, it took every ounce of restraint not to smile. She had no clue she was filing formal complaints to the president, but I stayed quiet. I wanted her to double down, to keep going, to show everyone exactly who she was when no one was looking. And boy, did she deliver. That Sunday, I took a walk around the neighborhood, just to clear my head. That's when I saw her at it again, harassing the couple on Maple Drive for hanging flower pots without written permission. 2 doors down, she was peeking over someone's backyard fence. A grown woman, spying through slats like it was a military operation. Everywhere I looked, people were on edge. You could feel it. The tension, the frustration, the fear of doing something that might offend the self-appointed neighborhood queen. I knew what I had to do. I wasn't just going to stop her from finding me. I was going to stop her from doing this to anyone else. I went home that night and printed everything. The bylaws, my email approval for the fence, every message Karen had ever sent me, screenshots of neighbors complaining in private threads. I even found an old copy of the community charter, something most people didn't know existed. And right there, in black and white, was a clause Karen had clearly violated multiple times. Come Monday, when that newsletter went out, the game would change. The board would be forced to acknowledge the new leadership. Karen would lose her power, grip, and the people who had been bullied into silence. They'd finally have a voice. The funny part, she still thought she was winning. The newsletter dropped at 9 a.m. sharp Monday morning. I watched from my kitchen window as neighbors wandered down their driveways, coffee mugs in hand, flipping through the little white envelope like it was just another update about garbage. Pick up, they had no idea. Not until they turned to page 2. Not until they read the line that said, effective immediately. The new HOA president is Mr. Redacted, replacing outgoing president James Delaney. That was me, the new president. I waited, no calls, no emails, nothing from Karen. For the first time in months, it was quiet. Until 3:47 p.m. That's when my doorbell rang and there she was, standing on my porch like a hurricane in pearls. You, she barked, holding up the newsletter like it was counterfeit. You're the new HOA president. I didn't answer right away. I just looked at her, watching her face turn every shade of disbelief, betrayal, and mild constipation. I nodded once. That's right. Her jaw clenched. This has to be a mistake. What do you even know about HOA leadership? This is a serious position. You don't just get to walk in and start calling shots. I smiled. Funny, I was thinking the same thing about you. That shut her up for about 5 seconds. Then the real meltdown began. Karen didn't go quiet. She went nuclear. She doubled down on everything. Filed another violation against my fence. Claimed it was a nuisance structure now. Demanded an emergency board meeting to reevaluate the election results. She even sent out a neighborhood-wide email titled Urgent Community Mismanagement Alert, where she basically accused me of hijacking the HOA, like it was a hostile corporate takeover. And you know what? I let her, because every word she wrote, every complaint she made, every absurd, drama-fueled accusation, I kept them all. Screenshots, printouts, times. I was building a case, and she was handing me the evidence gift-wrapped in pastel fonts. She started patrolling the neighborhood again, clipboard in hand, snapping pictures of people's lawns, measuring mailbox heights like she was conducting an FBI raid. One afternoon, I watched her march across the street to tell Mr. Delgado, who's 84, and walks with a cane, that his hedges were creeping past the community line. He just stared at her, confused. She left a violation notice on his front door anyway. It wasn't just about power anymore. Karen was spiraling. I got phone calls that week, lots of them. Some neighbors were angry, some were curious, most were just scared. They wanted to know if I could stop her. Soon, I said. Very soon. Because I wasn't going to make my move until the next HOA meeting. I wanted her to show up thinking she still ran the show. I wanted the board, the community, everyone in that room to see who she really was when she thought no one could stop her. So I played it cool. Let her file her bogus fines. Let her storm into yards with her tape measure and her self-importance. Let her try to paint me as the villain. And while she did all that, I worked. I reviewed every HOA, bylaw, every policy, every loophole she'd ever used to bully someone into silence. I drafted proposals to fix them. I prepared a public statement. I talked to neighbors one-on-one, built support the right way. The night before the meeting, I stood in my garage, looking at that half-built fence of mine, the one she tried to weaponize, the one that started it all, and I knew. We were almost there. Karen had no clue, but she was about to learn a lesson the hard way. The higher the pedestal, the harder the fall. The community center was packed tighter than I'd ever seen it. Folding chairs lined every inch of the room, neighbors shoulder to shoulder, whispering, buzzing with curiosity. You could feel it in the air. Something was about to happen. Something big. And right on cue. In came Karen. She strutted through the doors like a queen entering court, nose high, clutching her infamous clipboard like it was a holy relic. She didn't look left or right, just marched straight to the front, and took her usual seat next to the podium like she was the one about to lead the show. The board members filed in next. A few looked uncomfortable. A couple offered me awkward nods. And then came the secretary holding the sealed manila envelope. That would make everything official. I sat quietly in the second row. No fanfare, no announcement. Just calm, steady breathing as I watched her pretend to own the room. The meeting began the way they always did. Roll call. Last meetings, minutes. Budget reports. Karen interrupted twice, once to complain about a neighbor's unlicensed garden fountain, and once to question whether the refreshments table was violating a no open food policy. It was laughable, and everyone saw it. Then, finally, the secretary stood up, cleared her throat. Before we move forward, we have one item of major importance: the formal introduction of the new HOA board officers, effective immediately. Karen's smile froze. Per the election results, the following officers have been selected by community vote. She rattled off the treasurer, the secretary, and then paused. And as of this evening, the new president of the HOA is, she looked directly at me, Mr. Redacted. I stood up slowly. The room went silent. Karen turned. Her mouth fell open, but no words came out. She looked around, like someone had played a cruel prank on her. But no one was laughing. No one was saving her. I walked to the front of the room and stood behind the podium. Her chair was inches from mine. For the first time, Karen looked small, like she didn't know where to look, what to say, what to do. I looked out over the crowd and spoke into the mic. Thank you. I know most of you didn't expect this, and I didn't run for this position because I wanted power. I ran because I got tired of watching good people get pushed around. I ran because this community deserves leadership, not control. There were a few nods, a murmur of agreement. I continued. I've already reviewed the complaint filed against my property regarding a privacy fence that was approved in writing before construction began. That complaint was filed improperly, based on outdated policy, and driven by personal bias. I reached into my folder, pulled out the paper, and as your new HOA president, I'm dismissing it, effective immediately. I tore the violation notice in half, right there in front of her, folded it, set it on the table. Karen gasped, like someone had slapped her. You can't do that, she hissed under her breath. That's not how this works. I turned to her, calmly. Actually, Karen, this is exactly how it works. Then I faced the crowd again. In the coming weeks, we'll be reviewing the HOA charter. We'll be revising policies that have been used to intimidate and bully. There will be fair processes, clear communication, transparency. Someone clapped, then another, and before long, the entire room was applauding. Karen didn't clap. She sat there frozen, white-knuckled, her grip on that clipboard tightening, like she could still wrestle control back with enough outrage. But it was over. After the meeting, she tried to corner me, said she'd be escalating things, said she'd take this to the state board. I nodded, told her she was free to do what she felt was necessary. But deep down, she knew. The board didn't back her. The community didn't fear her. And I wasn't going anywhere. For the first time in a long time, she wasn't in charge. And the clipboard. She didn't bring it to the next meeting. Karen didn't disappear overnight. People like her rarely do. She still showed up to meetings, still hovered around the block like a ghost of tyranny past. But she was quieter now, slower. You could see it in her eyes. She knew the crown was gone. The clipboard. I haven't seen it in weeks. The first thing I did after the meeting was finish the fence. No drama, no noise, just a couple afternoons of hammering, leveling, sealing. Every plank I installed felt like a nail in the coffin of the old HOA. That fence wasn't just for privacy anymore, it was a statement, a boundary, not just around my yard, but around the nonsense that had plagued this community for years. And once it was done, I didn't stop there. I called a special board meeting. This time it wasn't just a bunch of stiff chairs and dull reports. I invited the community. Open door, open mic. For the first time, people actually showed up, not to be lectured, but to be heard. They talked about the fines, the intimidation, the surveillance. One neighbor said Karen had been measuring the distance between his recycling bins and his driveway, like it was a federal investigation. Another revealed she stopped planting flowers because Karen once threatened to report her for excessive soil usage. It was absurd, but it wasn't funny, not really. It had gone unchecked for too long. That's how people like Karen survive. Not with power, just silence. So I changed the rules. We revised the bylaws to include a clear limit on board authority. We implemented an appeal process. Every violation now required photo evidence, timestamps, and a review by multiple board members, not just one self-righteous enforcer with a grudge and a ruler. And something wild happened. People started smiling again. Kids played in the yards without their parents worrying about noise complaints. Neighbors brought out lawn chairs and actually talked to each other. One guy painted his door red, not neon, not illegal, just bold, and no one said a word, because it looked good, because it was his door. Karen tried to stir the pot a few more times. She filed a formal grievance about unauthorized chalk drawings on the sidewalk. I sent her a thank you card and a box of chalk. She didn't respond. Eventually, she stopped filing anything. Word got around to nearby neighborhoods. Other HOAs started asking what we did, how we fixed it. Turns out we weren't the only ones. With a Karen problem, we were just the first ones to take the clipboard out of her hands. And it wasn't about revenge. That was never the point. It was about something bigger. It was about community, about reminding people they weren't just living in a set of properties with matching mailboxes. They were neighbors, and neighbors deserve more than fear. They deserve fairness, respect, a chance to breathe. A few weeks later, I hosted a community barbecue in my yard. No permits, no approval forms, just a couple grills, some fold-out tables, and the kind of laughter this neighborhood hadn't heard in years. Karen didn't show up, but her house was just across the street, and I saw her, behind the blinds, peeking out for a few minutes before they slowly closed. I didn't feel smug. I didn't gloat. I just turned back to my guests, flipped a burger, and smiled, because the neighborhood was ours again, and it was finally home.